And one of the challenges that we ran into a lot in that department was you had a team of 30, 40 OR personnel putting away surgical instruments, pulling case carts, and whenever they called asking where something is, we had no idea. We just reprocessed it and sent it back to the OR.
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal to help you fight dirty. Every instrument, every time. Whether you're tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now, turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go beyond clean.
This week on Beyond Clean, we speak to a new member of the team, Bobby Parker, clinical manager here at Beyond Clean. We're going to be welcoming him on his inaugural, employee episode. I don't know how we want to term that, Hank, but everybody who joins the team gets an episode. We are having him on to talk about sterile storage, but specifically how we can improve access to the sterile storage area and the communication in that regard between the OR and the sterile processing departments by utilizing an OR liaison, which is something that both you and Bobby have experience with working in departments together. And we're going to hear some really cool stories coming up. So don't go anywhere. This one's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, Justin, Bobby is a part of an award-winning department and has a history of just leading some excellent teams out there, many of which were driven to their heights of excellence by this OR liaison position that we're going to talk about on this show. And there's so many impacts into this sterile storage piece that it is the theme of season 14. And so I'm super pumped to talk to him today about that. And also to dig into some of the cultural implications. It's not just about process and quality, but it also does have a real people impact as well. So looking forward to talking about that on the show.
All right, let's get right into it. We're going to be back after a short break with Bobby Parker. I'm Justin Poulin.
And I'm Hank Balch.
From 17 Studios, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
All right, we're speaking with Bobby Parker, clinical manager at Beyond Clean, new to the team. And as we like to do when we bring people onto the team, we bring you onto the podcast and introduce you to the world. And we're in the middle of a season talking about sterile storage. And Bobby, we're bringing you on to talk about that connection between OR and SPD, specifically sterile storage, and the role that OR liaisons play in taking sterile storage to the next level. First off, welcome to the Beyond Clean team. And secondly, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Justin and Hank. It's been definitely a joy to be joining the team and love what you guys have been doing with this podcast and looking forward to this interview.
Well, I think our audience can expect to see your face a little bit more as we continue to grow your role within the organization. You're just kind of getting your feet under you, but you do many valuable things for us as a clinical manager, both in the consulting realm, but also in the content creation side, which kind of is such a unique opportunity career-wise for Beyond Clean. So I know that you and Hank work together, and as I love to do when people come on this show that have a history with Hank, what is your, and I don't know, I'll say favorite, but my preference would be most embarrassing Hank Balch story?
This is an easy one, Justin. So Hank and I started at the same sterile processing department in Louisville, Kentucky. And on my first day there, they didn't have enough male lockers for the sterile processing technicians. And so I ended up sharing a locker with some anonymous person, and it turned out to be Hank. Hank left earlier than I did that day, and when I got back to the locker, there was a note card in my jeans pocket that said, Bobby, if you ever put your stuff in my locker again, I'll kill you. Love, Hank. Hank and I knew each other before that point. We were good friends, so it was all in good fun. But yeah, hilarious start to our working relationship there.
All right, so here's a curveball. I've never done this before. Hank, what's the most embarrassing story for Bobby?
Oh, my gosh. Well, so I'm going to go in opposite direction because I do embarrassing things, but Bobby is like the most boring coworker known to man. Like, and by boring, I mean compliant, you know. You would describe him as more of like a straight-laced type of guy on the outside. But as you get to know him, that's where kind of the humor comes out and the fun comes out. But honestly, I don't have an embarrassing story about Bobby to even share.
Compliance pays off from time to time, Justin. Is what
Right. So Bobby, this is where I thought you were going with your story. And honestly, I don't know if you were working with us at Jewish Hospital when this happened or not, but were you there for the safety shower testing?
I missed it by 2 weeks, Hank, but I heard a lot about it.
All right, so let me tell this story real quick as another way to embarrass myself. We were doing some compliance testing and training the staff around how to use the safety shower. And, you know, mind you, this shower had not been tested in years, you know, and it should have been tested like annually. And I get all the staff around. The shower is in the clean side, right outside of where the old like ETO sterilizers used to be. Get everyone around. I get the testing bucket and like this big like umbrella kind of thing that you're supposed to like funnel all the water down into this 5-gallon bucket. I asked for a volunteer to come pull down the handle to test this thing. We're just going to, you know, pull it down for a couple seconds, let it flow so everyone sees what happens. Well, I get the volunteer, you know, she pulls down the handle and the handle gets stuck, number one. Number two, the flow of water was so powerful that whatever little flimsy funnel thing that we're holding completely drops down. Number three, that like years of old dirty water in the basement of like a 1920s hospital starts flowing down on me. The thing is stuck. The handle's stuck, right? So like we can't even get it back up to shut off. And all the while, one of my technicians is standing over there with his smartphone videotaping this event.
Hold on. Do you still have the video?
No, I don't have the video now.
We've got a national audience. There is somebody out there.
I know who has the video. Yeah, I know who had the video, but we'll have to try to track it down.
We got to track it down. That's got to get out on LinkedIn. info@beyondclean.net. If you know where this mysterious video of Hank is, I want it.
I'll pay $100 for it if anyone can surface.
Seriously. Yep.
That thing.
Legit. First person to deliver the video gets $100. You heard it here first on Beyond Clean.
Anyways.
All right. So I guess we should talk about OR liaisons and sterile storage, but that was a lot of fun. Thank you both for entertaining my desire to get to know both of you a little bit better and let the audience have some fun as we get started. So, Bobby, why don't you just talk a little bit more about your professional experience since you're the straight man, according to Hank. This is a softball for you. Tell me about your background.
Sure. Yeah. So I ended up in sterile processing, much like many of us do, by accident. I got started in sterile processing having recently gotten married and was looking for better insurance and thought a hospital was the way to go, had some connections there, and really just fell in love with it. The connection with patient care as well as just how much there is to learn. You know, something new to learn every day was something that I was excited about. It was not the experience that I was expecting, which was like the dish room at the back of the Cracker Barrel I had been working at the time. And so, yeah, fell in love with it, worked with and under some tremendous and progressive leaders who were really looking for potential in people and developing leaders, and had some great early opportunities, and has turned into a field that I'm very passionate about and a career that I've enjoyed growing in. Had the opportunity to work in a number of facilities around Louisville and managed a very high-performing department there in Louisville. We won the Healthcare Purchasing News Department of the Year award in 2016, which was something we were all very excited about. And, That's all.
When you had it, I was like, oh, yeah. So, Bobby, thanks. That is awesome. Great experience there. I want to talk a little bit about this OR SPD liaison. And I know you didn't describe just now that you performed in that role, but you worked a lot with OR and SPD liaisons because they were kind of part of your structure, because not everybody has one. And so I would kind of like, from your perspective, talk about what they did, at the facilities you've worked at, and then also, what some of the benefits were to you, right? As a technician working in the department, you were like, wow, this really serves a great function for this reason.
Sure. Yeah. The only department that I've had the privilege of having a liaison in is the department that I was managing there in Louisville. And yeah, what a tremendous impact that it made both on the culture and on the processes in the department. So our OR SPD liaison is just what it sounds like. They're a liaison. They're a go-between between sterile processing and the OR. So even though this particular employee was budgeted under sterile processing as an employee, they spent the majority of their time in the OR, building relationships in the OR, learning the needs of the OR, so that they can really help preempt a lot of the concerns, questions, and service issues the OR might experience before they have to experience those issues. And so, yeah, I'm sure we'll get more into exactly what that role looked like at that hospital, but definitely a tremendous impact on the way that the two departments are able to relate.
All right. So, Bobby, that's a great description of it. Now, talk to us about the person, right? Because you described the role in kind of a high level overview, but what kind of sterile processing professional did you look for in staffing that role? And in the ones that you've had, which ones really stuck out as an excellent type of liaison?
Yeah, it's funny you ask. This particular role is primarily a customer service role. It's all about service recovery. They need to be the type of person who can stand in an OR room with an upset OR nurse and solve the problem, stay focused on the problem, be able to apologize for the incident on behalf of the department, and be a problem solver. And so some of the best liaisons we had backgrounds in customer service. I'm just thinking of the few that I had the privilege of managing. Several of them had experience in call centers prior to working in sterile processing. Mm-hmm. One came from a Chick-fil-A background. And so just ideas of people who are able to navigate a difficult conversation and have excellent customer service ended up being great candidates. Now, as a manager, that isn't necessarily something that I would write into the required section on the job description, but it is something in the interview process you want to look for. Is this the type of person who can solve problems, who can navigate difficult customer service conversations, and just conduct themselves with integrity?
And I'm imagining confidence is another one of those, like you kind of mentioned that and alluded to, like you need to be able to take the heat, but you also need to be able to inject yourself into some stressful situations sometimes on the customer facing side. But then there's another side of a liaison that you got to turn around and come back home to sterile processing many times to do things or say things. So what quality in a person is required to do that part well? Because I know in my own experience, the issues sometimes that we had with our OR liaisons who struggled in the role is they would do great in the OR, make great friendships, really build bridges. And then when they came back to SPD, they were problem children for one reason or another. So is there anything that kind of stands out as the type of person who could balance both of those in a correct manner?
Sure. Yeah. So you talked about the need to be able to have some difficult conversations and be tough. I tell you, if you've worked in sterile processing very long, you've certainly encountered a situation where you're asked for something that you know that you can't give, or asked to bend the rules a bit. And so as the OR liaison, is the person who's in that room, taking that call, answering that question, they have to have the backbone to face with the OR, be able to give the right answer, even if it's the unpopular one. And so, yeah, having that sterile conscience, that integrity to be able to make the right decision, even when it's very inconvenient, super important. In terms of balancing the two, I hear where you're coming from, because that OR liaison most of the conversations they have are related to process failures and complaints. People want to talk to the OR liaison when things are going wrong. And so a number of our liaisons over time begin to get a bit jaded because the only side of SPD that they see are the problems. And so they just need to be tied in very closely with SPD leadership and have a great deal of confidence and faith in that leadership team to be able to affect the changes that are needed in that department so that their daily routine is not getting blasted in the OR. And if you're able to do that effectively, you can really help that liaison be able to walk the line in kind of both departments.
I think the way we would say that in the South is don't forget where you came from. Don't get above your sterile processing raising is another way. So bringing all that to sterile storage, right? Because we're having this conversation in the context of the Sterile Storage Wars conversation. And there's a lot of things that OR liaisons do and can do that impact all kinds of things. But particularly with the sterile storage piece, I want to flesh that out with folks because I know there's going to be a lot of folks listening who don't have a liaison and are like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. Or they have a liaison and perhaps they're still having issues around their sterile storage areas that the liaison could potentially help. So line out like what those duties are as it relates to sterile storage for an OR SPD liaison first.
Sure, yeah. So it's going to look different in each facility as every place has its own processes, but a popular model in sterile processing is to have the sterile inventory and that sterile storage over close to the OR that the OR kind of managed. I've worked in a department that was that way, and one of the challenges that we ran into a lot in that department was you had a team of 30, 40 OR personnel putting away surgical instruments, pulling case carts, and whenever they called asking where something is, we had no idea. We just reprocessed it and sent it back to the OR. And so having that sterile processing representative, that personnel who's going to be spending the majority of their time in the OR, that can help a lot with just tracking the chain of custody of instruments so that when they leave the sterile processing department, they're not gone in the wind, if you will. Another thing that I think of that helped a lot in the department that I was managing is our OR liaison quality checked case carts to make sure that the OR had what they need. And that really cut down on a lot of the scramble of phone calls as you're having cases going on and the OR is wanting 10 different things in 5 different rooms at the same time, all at 7:30 because first cases are starting. Being able to get to those case carts and QA them ahead of time really slows down that frenzy and makes sure that we've got everything started on a smooth trajectory.
That's huge. If there was like one reason to get a liaison, that QA of the case carts, that's the one that I would probably put almost at the top of the list because you're right. The worst time in the entire first shift is that kind of 6:30 to 7 kind of window when all these first cases are starting and they're popping open the case carts and saying, what I need is not in here. And what's so interesting from the OR liaison perspective is many times it is in there. It's just called something different than what that nurse thought it was, or it's not packaged in the same way that it was last week, or maybe it's not in there, but it's in another case card that's outside the room. So instead of calling directly down to SPD, you've got this liaison who their whole job every single day is to specialize in case card issues. Unlike the OR team, who's got a lot of responsibilities related to patient care and surgery, and even the SPD team, who's got all their own responsibilities. But now you have this role who they're all about case cart compliance, sterile storage efficiency, and they get to do that every single day. So they get really, really, really good at it. I mean, I think that's just a great selling point for that role. In addition to that, though, do they have any kind of maintenance responsibilities, any process improvement impact to sterile storage? Like, what are some experiences that you've had with that?
Yeah, one of the unique things that the liaison gets to do, because they have a foot in both houses, is they get to see issues from both sides. They understand the OR struggles with delivery times or the pressure squeezes of having to turn the room over that make pre-cleaning so difficult, the things that SPD grumbles about all of the time. They understand a little bit more of that. They also are able to understand SPD struggles as well. And so when you are working in sterile processing, thinking of these different processes that you're going to put in place to fix problems, they're able to think a little bit more with the OR's mind and help temper those suggestions and make good suggestions. So a couple of examples that I can think of that where our liaison really helped out with process improvement. I'd say the biggest one came in instrument set optimization. Every day they're going through that case cart, QAing sets that are going to be put on the carts, and they're also getting called into that room dealing with issues or doing just service check-ins, and they're able to see where a lot of the waste is, what is coming back from rooms unused. One example that I could think of from a neuro service line, we had this huge burr hole set that was used in certain craniotomy cases, and there was a lot of overlap with the cranial instruments tray. They were able to build a little accessory tray that could just be tacked onto the craniotomy instrument tray so that whenever we needed that tray, it was only adding 10, 12 instruments instead of 80 to 100 like it had been. Those types of instrument set optimizations were huge. The last thing that I would think about would be preference card edits. Now, that wasn't our liaison's job, but the people in the OR who were responsible for updating those preference cards whenever we were routinely having calls for sets that we didn't know they were going to need, even though that responsibility lied with that coordinator in the OR to update those, they often didn't have the time. And so our liaison was able to build those relationships, earn that trust to be able to make some of those edits on their behalf. And as the department who was pulling case carts, what a huge difference that makes in time spent dealing with the case carts, as well as just the effects of being able to get that right with the OR. So yeah, that was huge.
So Bobby, I want to kind of ask your perspective on the educational aspects of this role as well, because a lot of facilities may have a SPD educator, but I see a big component, not only the ambassador part of this role, but also the educator role. And I think a lot of people would say, well, I really want this person to be able to educate the OR on what's going on here. But I also think that it really should flow the other way, that education about what's happening in the OR should also be brought to SPD, and that actually that might be some of the greatest value that can come back because they can put it into a different context and translate some of the communication that sometimes comes from the OR, but into the perspective of a frontline worker in sterile processing. I've never really been in a department that's utilized an OR liaison. Do you see that happening, or is that more like, yeah, that's a great idea, but that doesn't really happen?
No, we did some of that, and thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. Just thinking through the liaisons that we had, these tend to be your high performers, your problem solvers, your thinkers. And so all of them were gifted speakers and cared a lot about the success of our department. If we were succeeding at the key performance indicators that we had set apart, then their job is going to be a lot easier. And so they absolutely wanted to see sterile processing grow. And so in our department meetings, we would leave space for our liaisons to be able to bring back some of the feedback that they're hearing from the OR. They also got a lot more of that feedback than we got through the traditional channels as well, because OR techs are busy. They don't have time to type an email or to fill out a report and send back to SPD management. They're just going to grab the liaison by the shoulder and let them know what happened. And they're able to document those kind of frictions and bring those back to the department. And that was definitely a huge help.
I want to go back to something, Bobby, you said about the preference cards, and you probably shocked some folks who were like, whoa, hold on. The OR let someone from your department update their preference cards? Like, how did that happen? And I've got some inside knowledge here because you and I were in the same department, so I know how that happened. But I want you to set it up, because what that goes into is trust. Somehow, you were able to build such strong trust with this operating room team through this OR liaison position that they were willing to hand over the keys to one of the most valuable things in the whole freaking operating room, and it's those preference cards. And they said, yeah, we trust your staff member in SPD to make the changes that our surgeon is going to hold us accountable for tomorrow morning. How did that happen? And is that tied to any other kind of success stories that you would kind of put out there and say, this is how valuable this role can be?
Sure. Yeah. As you imagine, that's not something that happens overnight. And like you said, it's all built on trust and having that rapport. And nothing's going to build trust and rapport like performance will. And so, yeah, having a department where you're able to have some small wins related to sterile storage that demonstrate we know what we're talking about, and they're able to feel the benefit of those things. As those small wins build up, you're able to build towards bigger things. So at this particular facility, when we got started with Liaisons, a lot of the sterile storage was in the OR still, and case cart pulling was very limited involvement from SPD. And as we were able to show, like, the more that SPD is able to be involved in and participate in that case cart pulling process and that knowledge of the sterile storage, the better we're able to prioritize, the less frequently they're going to experience issues where something's not sterile whenever they're expecting it to be sterile. And the more you build on that, the more they're going to be able to trust you to let go of some of that sterile storage emergency sets right around the corner that they can grab right when they need it. I will also caveat the degree of control that we had over the preference cards, because as we presented that, it was always in the aspect of, if we see something, we're going to call it out and ask for an email approval from the person who's responsible for that particular preference card, and they could document, yep, go ahead, and we would execute that plan.
That's a great point to cover your butt, as they say. Just because you do get an okay from someone who is a nurse in the room doesn't necessarily mean that whole service line agrees. And so, yeah, tracking that approval process, that's a good little caveat to put in there. Bringing this in again to really laser focus on storage. In your experience and perspective, how then could folks out there who, again, maybe have a liaison or don't have a liaison, but they want one now after this interview, how can they improve things like your peel packs, like making changes in sterile storage, like impact and accountability? Like, what are some of those concrete things that you can lay out there as like, yes, this is what they can do. Boom, boom, boom.
Sure, yeah. So let's start with peel packs. We had our liaison managing peel packs. That was the primary inventory that we had up in the OR for emergency quick grabs. And having one person who has knowledge of what gets used in the OR, what the needs are in the OR, managing those peel packs, definitely helped to be able to optimize those, to figure out what needs to be there, what doesn't need to be there, what are quick turners, and having eyes on it all the time so that that bin never runs out and we don't experience the service issue of the OR needing something in an emergency and it wasn't available. Again, if you're able to do that well, that's another small win that's going to earn you some trust for some bigger projects down the road. Another thing with sterile storage that was probably one of the bigger stories at our facility is our liaison really impacted our immediate use sterilization rate. And the way that ties to sterile storage is when we inserted our liaison in between the OR nurse and that OR autoclave as somebody that they needed to go through to get that cycle run, they were able to ask some problem-solving type questions to be able to see if we can figure out a way to fulfill this need without using immediate use sterilization. So if it's a vendor tray that we don't have another one and the simple answer is just to immediate use sterilize it, that liaison may think and discover that there is a similar case for the fourth case today. Let's grab the one from there, use it now, and let's turn over this set for the fourth case for later today. That can really impact the way that trays are moving quickly in and out of sterile storage if you're able to manage your immediate use sterilization well.
Yeah, Bobby, that theme of trust and the ability to leverage that trust to improve the process, just in that IUS example that you gave, because you can't insert yourself between the nurse and the autoclave if they don't trust you. They'll just walk right through you. Like, who do you think you are between me and getting this ready for my patient? But if that trust is established or being established, they're much more willing to say, okay, if they're asking me questions, and that means they could potentially help me get this quicker and get it in a fashion, yes, it has been terminally sterilized. So that theme is just like so consistent throughout here. And I want to bring it to something that you've already kind of brought up a little bit, but maybe can flesh out as we wrap up the show. And that's the cultural implications of this. What does it mean in your department in sterile processing to have an OR liaison that's supporting your sterile storage culturally? And then kind of turn your attention to the OR? Like, what cultural implications does it have for the OR to have this liaison there supporting those sterile goods?
Yeah, culturally, it makes a big impact. So looking at sterile processing first, Hank, you've been a sterile processing tech before. You know what it feels like to be in the department day in and day out and not have a direct voice to the OR. You experience issues, you run it up the chain to your management team, you hope that they're being addressed, but you don't really know. So having that dedicated person who's in the OR huddles every single day, who's interacting with those OR nurses and knows them by name, definitely gives a lot of confidence to a sterile processing technician that the issues we're experiencing we're able to address appropriately and address directly. So in a way, they're kind of a champion of the people, you know, David being sent down the valley to go battle Goliath, you know. It definitely can help culturally to have that person who is going to be able to take concerns to the OR. On the other side of the street, it's a huge deal for the OR to have a red phone to the expert. Somebody they know that they can trust, that if they're having an issue, they can dial an extension. They're going to get somebody who answers the phone that they know is going to know the answer, or that they're at least going to be able to help them problem solve it. And I think that's been the biggest differentiator. There have been times in that department that we were talking about where, for various reasons, that position was vacant for a period between liaisons, and yeah, just talking with those OR nurses, they will tell you what a tremendous difference it makes to be able to call SPD and know exactly who they're going to get on the phone, somebody who knows their service line well and can answer their question quickly without having to discuss it with a supervisor or ask a more experienced technician. That's a big win for the OR, and something that I think every department should seriously consider if they're serious about the culture between their department and the OR.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. I mean, that culture piece is so critical, and it does solve a lot of problems, right? Because it's not just about establishing trust as the liaison. It's about maintaining the trust between the two departments so that everything can work far more efficiently. You know, I can imagine it also decreases not only that the OR is getting one person and that consistency when they call down, but I can imagine the access to sterile storage is much more limited, and it's often the liaison that's accessing it that understands the considerations of going in and out of sterile storage. Did they also function in that role, just as we're kind of closing up on that culture piece?
Yes, absolutely. And we talked about the accountability piece of making sure that sets are tracked appropriately, that sets are scanned to where they're supposed to go. Having that liaison who's the ones putting hands on sets really can help with holes as trays are moving around, that they're handling them appropriately and making sure that sets are being tracked to the right location. So yeah, absolutely. It helps with sterile storage in that way.
Yeah, you get the data integrity, you get the integrity of the sterile packaging and maintaining sterility. There's so many benefits to having somebody who really understands that environment. And, you know, when that understanding is not there from the OR, they may not always realize that they're compounding the issues that they're having every single day. And so getting a handle on that, it's just great for everybody. Nice interview, Bobby. Really great job today. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I've enjoyed it.
And welcome again to the team. That was Bobby Parker, clinical manager here at Beyond Clean. His first appearance on the show, Hank, although based on the stories that we heard at the very beginning of this episode, I'm surprised it took you so long. Or no, never mind. I'm not surprised it took you so long to have him come and tell some crazy stories about you. But this OR liaison role, boy, are some people going to be jealous if they don't have one in place, because there's a lot of reasons. And we did kind of stay on theme with sterile storage, but there's broader reasons to want this role or to find a way to, you know, have it crafted into your department structure for sure. But as it relates to sterile storage, it's kind of like we've had some conversations, Hank, about how do we keep people out of sterile storage, right? You know, and we've joked about the taser kind of off air and, you know, little things like that. We're having security guards. But honestly, this is the best way. It's the most functional way. It's the most culturally healthy way. And it doesn't really, you know, kind of put a stigma on the situation. It's all in a genuine effort to improve the communication and the efficiency in the work that is going on between the two departments, sterile processing and the operating room.
The only reason that you need to go into sterile storage in the middle of the day is if something's not correct on your case cart or if something in the middle of your case changed. Both of those reasons are great reasons to call your OR liaison and say, hey, can you bring this to room 3? Or, hey, what's going on with my case cart? And yeah, that solves all the issues, to your point, Justin, because it reduces the traffic down to 1, and that one person knows that sterile storage like the back of their hand and can get it correctly and efficiently and safely, which is just as important as all the rest of those. So I'm a huge advocate and fan of that role. And yes, it can have tremendous impact on culture and just the overall excellence of your sterile storage area.
Yeah, and I also like the preference card piece, and for a secondary reason that we didn't discuss so much on the show, but there's also the awareness in sterile processing that gets disseminated when that change is made. And so if it's a kind of a big change or whatnot, the OR liaison can communicate that, not just like the next time you see the pick list, right? It's changed, or maybe you notice it, maybe you don't. But I think just communicating that, or any insight that sterile processing would have to add to the decisions that are being made when you're revising the preference card. I think just having that mutual accountability is a, pardon the pun, recipe for success. That's going to do it for this week's show. As a reminder, you can help support Beyond Clean by subscribing on Apple, Amazon, or Google Podcasts. You can also find us on Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or search for Beyond Clean on your favorite podcast application. We've also got bonus content for you on certain episodes, and you can access that by downloading our smartphone application for iPhone and Android. We'd certainly appreciate a rating and a review because your feedback is important to the show. And if you have any topics that you'd like us to cover on a future episode, or if you've got a guest recommendation for the show, just send an email to info@beyondclean.net. On behalf of Hank and myself, thank you for listening to this week's episode of Beyond Clean.